Welcome to the Q&A of the Emelin Film Club screening of Spoiler Alert. Tonight we have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Ausiello, the author of the memoir, as well as the executive producer of the film. And welcome, Michael. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. So one of the things that I was interested to read in the press notes was, it was very clear that this film was based on a memoir, but I did not realize that the memoir was actually based on a series of Facebook posts, and it was not your original idea. So if you could share a little bit with us about that.
The Facebook poster was really what got me led to the opportunity for the book, because I've been chronicling the experience, kids' experience, our experience on this cancer journey for that year on Facebook with our close family and friends, but there were also some acquaintances on there. One of them was an editor at Simon & Schuster, Rakesh Satyal, and he reached out to me a couple months after a kid had died and asked if I considered turning the story into a book, because he was very moved by the Facebook posts and thought that maybe there was a story there. And I thought about it for a week and came back to him and said, yes. I mean, the idea of it terrified me, mostly because the idea of diving back into some of the painful moments from the worst year, and also in some ways the best year of my life, just seemed masochistic, especially so soon after kid died. But I also knew that if I were going to do the story justice, I needed to do it while everything was fresh in my mind, especially the small details. Like the kinds of medications that he took, about how I changed his colostomy bag, all of those things. I just knew that I needed to write it sooner or rather than later. But that complicated the grieving process. It made it much harder.
That's interesting. I was actually going to ask you if it provided any catharsis, and that's interesting that it sounds like that was not the case.
No, there was no catharsis. It was just pain. I mean, some aspects of writing the book were terrible, like, because obviously we do flashbacks to earlier in our relationship, but even that was hard because it just made me miss him more, and it was just it didn't feel like, I don't think the body naturally is ready to, after a trauma like that, to dive right back into the trauma and then relive it in your head in such specific detail so that you can remember the small moments. It was hard.
Right. Well, thank you for doing it, because it was very, I think it's probably relatable to a lot of people who have lost people close to them in their lives, even if it was not a partner per se. But I think there are a lot of really relatable aspects of it. So thank you for digging deep and sharing that time and trauma, because I'm sure I'm far from the only one. And speaking of these details, however painful they were to revisit, I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes the film so engaging and transporting. You really do capture a depth of detail that breathes so much life into the story. And, I loved everything from, the Smurfs in the apartment. And I have to ask, to what extent was that perhaps exaggerated by the set designers, or perhaps did they downplay it? How close to reality was that rendering?
Well, I will tell you, in one way, it was very close to reality, in that was my collection that they used in those.
Wow.
And that was only a fraction of the collection. It wasn't the whole collection. I will say that some dramatic license was taken in embellishing that moment. I don't know that I had quite so many Smurfs on display when Kid came to my apartment for the first time, but I will say that there were enough Smurfs, and they were assembled, and they were organized in such a terrible way that it it did become a moment of crisis for our relationship, because Kit was such an artist and had such a keen eye for design and was so just smart about style that it was tough for him to reconcile that the person that he was falling in love with was also the person who lived like this and was an adult who still collected Smurfs.
Right.
And looking back, I understand.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's interesting, you know, I think that can be a foil for a very relatable dynamic in a relationship. What are the priorities of, you know, two halves of a couple? And, you know, how do you navigate the compromises and acceptances that, you know, make any relationship? And to me, I think that was really I think that was communicated very well by the screenwriters, Jim Parsons and the actor who played Kit. I think that was a very believable dynamic, and also, again, very relatable. So I'm curious, you know, speaking of creative and dramatic licenses, what were some of the other creative choices that would fall into that category that you know, differed from your experience, B, to the book, and C, to the film, that you found yourself having to perhaps navigate and work with the screenwriters on?
Well, one of the big deviations from the book is the timing of our marriage. So Kit and I, in reality, got married the same day that we got the terrible diagnosis at Sloan Kettering. Literally, we went from Sloan Kettering to City Hall and got married on that same day. So it was at the beginning of the cancer journey, whereas in the movie, you know, for dramatic reasons, was moved to the end of the story. It's sort of a a crescendo to the story, which I understood, and obviously I did not fight that. I understood why that had to be done, but that's a pretty big change from the book. Other than that, I can't really think of anything. Obviously, the book is a lot more detailed, and there's just a lot more stuff in it, and you can't capture all of that in a 2-hour movie. So there's a lot of stuff that that didn't make it into the movie, but the important stuff, the big stuff, for me anyway, is in there.
Right. And do you feel that, I was actually also curious to know if you ever considered writing the screenplay yourself, or if you felt like you needed to have some separation from the writing of the screenplay and the writing of the book?
Everything was on the table, everything was considered. And there was a time where initially, early in the process, where it's like, can I do this? Should I do this? Also, I have a career separate from this, another full-time job. And would I be able to juggle both of those things? The book, I was allowed to sort of really work on my own timeline. So basically that was just working on weekends. With a screenplay, you're under the gun a little bit more. And so I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do it. Ultimately, everyone sort of agreed that they wanted to see what the story could become in the hands of other screenwriters, and who they wanted to see how they would interpret the story. And David and Dan came to us with a really interesting idea that leaned into the television, Michael's love of television, that was beautiful. And ultimately, they just gave us this beautiful blueprint for the story.
Yeah, I think it's a really strong screenplay. So are you referencing the device where it's a flashback to your childhood as a single camera sitcom with an audience laugh track? Is that what you're referring to?
I was actually referring to the moment at the end where Michael said goodbye to Kit, and suddenly we're on a television set, and he's in the middle of a soap opera, and his worlds are colliding. And that was David and Dan's brilliant idea to do that. And I think Michael Showalter executed it beautifully.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I thought that was very effective. I mean, but I think having something so straightforward might have felt a little sudden or out of place. Now, in terms of those recreations of the sitcom, the sort of the 80s sitcoms, were those somehow, were those captured in your memoir? Is that something that was in your
No, so we do get glimpses into my childhood, but not in the form of the sitcom flashbacks. And that is another example of the sort of the fantasy element of TV. That was Michael Showalter's idea, though, and that came after the script was already written. We were searching for a way, a lens through which we could tell Michael's story, my story. It's always weird talking about myself like in the third person or whatever it is, but right. Michael had this idea of what if we saw Michael's childhood through the lens of a traditional 3-camera 80s sitcom. And the moment he said that, it just was like, we were all like, yes, of course, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I thought that was very funny and also a sensitive way to sort of plumb the childhood history and trauma that you experienced at that, in a way that was, not so expository, with you talking to a kid or something. I thought that really worked well. And so I saw, again, having had the benefit of reading the press kit, I saw that you were instrumental in this going in the direction of a film adaptation, and you played a key role by sharing your memoir with Jim Parsons, and that being not just, sharing your book with a friend, but it was purposeful that you shared the book with him. And so
what was purposeful, not in terms of movie.
Oh, okay.
No, it was purposeful in terms of I wanted him to moderate a Q&A the week my book came out at Barnes & Noble in Los Angeles. And I wanted to send him the book to read it so that he would do the Q&A. He said he agreed to the Q&A without even reading the book. And he eventually did read the book. And it was at that Q&A where him and his husband mentioned to me that they had been talking about optioning it and would it be something that I would consider. And that was the first time the idea really ever came to me. And like literally the moment before Jim and I walked out for this Q&A, they dropped this bomb on me, like, we want to turn this into a movie. I mean, the best kind of bomb.
Right, of course, yeah.
But still, it was not something that was, in my headspace.
Gotcha. Okay, so I misinterpreted that. So good to clarify there. Yeah. So once he planted that seed, did you like the idea, and did you think it was going to be a nice way to share, or a compelling way to share what was beautiful and wonderful about Kid and your relationship together, and the sort of the bigger messages of, sort of, to me, it's the classic message of better to have loved and lost than to not have loved at all. And, like that story doesn't get old. It's so potent and powerful and moving. And I'm curious what it took for you to think going from memoir to movie was going to add to it.
So my first reaction when they said it was, I mostly saw it as the nicest compliment for the book. Now, the book had just come out, and I wasn't really sure how it would be received. So by mentioning if they wanted to option, I was like, oh, wow, they really did love the book. So that was a nice boost for me emotionally, and a boost of confidence ahead of the book coming out. And then it was something that I thought about, and it was conversations I had, because it was not a decision I took lightly. And there was other interests, and I had conversations with other people, and it was, ultimately if I was going to do it, I was going to do it with people that I trusted, and also people who understood that this was a process that I will be involved with every step of the way. I'm not looking to sell the rights to this story and then step away and let them do what they want with it. I was going to be involved. I was going to be protective about aspects of the story, but involved. And Jim agreed to that and was on board with that, and I trusted him, and I put my trust in the hands of smartly put my trust in his hands, because it came out beautifully.
Yeah, no, it really did. So speaking of what you just shared in terms of really wanting to be involved every step of the way, my last question is actually second to last question. I have one quick question at the end. Entering into this process, what were the sort of key creative decisions that you felt like were really going to be, sort of closest to your heart in terms of feeling comfortable with this process? Like what mattered most to you?
Two of the biggest things for me were Kit wasn't a victim,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not interested in any kind of movie that portrayed him as such. Not that anyone gave me any indication that that's what they were going to do. I was very clear up front that this is not a story about a victim of cancer. This is a story of someone who fought like hell, and did it with humor and grace and honesty. The other part was that if his parents were going to be included in the story, and I very much wanted them to be, that they needed to be portrayed as people who showed up for their son when he was sick, and that never shirked from not the responsibility, but from the experience of being with their son, because I think that's a difficult thing when your only child gets sick, and I'm not sure a parent would be brave enough to want to put themselves on the front lines of that. And Kit's parents did do that,
Right.
without hesitation,
Right.
and that we needed to be faithful to that in the movie.
Well, assuming the characterization of them is accurate, they seem like such incredibly wonderful people, and with a lot of heart and humor. And I just love that scene where he sort of has that unplanned coming out. I just love that scene. It's they're so funny. And that is actually a good segue to my last question, which is unrelated to the film or the screenplay or your memoir. It is if you're still in touch with them, because it seemed like you really had a true bond with them yourself.
I did. They were my surrogate parents. I touch on this in the book a little bit, that after Kit died, the dynamic shifts. It's like, this is their only child, this is my husband, and suddenly this one link that we have is gone, and I wasn't sure what our relationship would be or what it would become. They are still very much in my life. Do I see them as much as I did when Kit was alive? No. We've moved in different directions, and we've gone our own grief journeys. But I still see them, and I visited them as recently as June over the summer in Millersburg and had a lovely day with them. And they will always be in my life, and they will always be dear to me. And they are as funny and smart and brave as it's portrayed in the movie.
Right. Well, that's they seem like very special people, and I'm sure that they're going to love the film because they come off so well in it. So with that, well, thank you for your time and making the film in the first place. Really touching and ultimately happy story that you shared with us. So I'm really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this and the support. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a terrific film, and we're happy to experience it. So thank you, Michael, and best of luck with the release.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.